So I'd like to address the echo in the room because there is a serious echo problem in this new office that I got. That's right, I have a new office, which I'm very proud of. I have desks and shelves and, well, a desk and shelves and cupboards and loads of cool stuff. So very happy with the new office. The only problem is there's a really bad echo problem in here, so I have to buy some sound absorbing panels and maybe put them up here on the wall. And hopefully that will fix the problem, but I want to apologize because during the whole tutorial there is a pretty bad echo sound, so you might have to deal with that. Anyway, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at how we can go about cloning Mixamo characters and their animations. It's not as simple as just bringing in your Mixamo character and putting it into a cloner, but there is a quick fix to the problem you will find if you try to do it like that. So we're going to be talking about how we do that. We're also going to be talking about motion blur. We're going to be setting this up using the physical renderer in Cinema 4D, and we're going to be creating some motion blur. Now this is very heavy on render times, so you guys might be aware that you can actually set up a fake motion blur in After Effects. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be doing the actual Cinema 4D motion blur. So be prepared for a bit of heavy render times if you do want to render out this scene. So let's get started on this. Here we go. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is bring in our Mixamo character. Now you guys might be using your own Mixamo character for this. If not, you're welcome to download this one from the description below. So I just want to show you what I'm doing there. I'm going File, Merge, and let's just double click on the character and click OK. Make sure that your character is standing on the floor before we do anything. And you can see that we have more frames in our scene. So let's just drag this so that we're going to actually play all of those frames. And you'll notice that my character actually loops, the animation loops. So that's not important for you. If your character doesn't loop, it's not really a big deal. We're just focusing on how we're going to be going about cloning this character and the animation. So I want to delete off the eyelashes first of all. So I'm just going to do that right now. And I want to add all of these objects into a null. So select all of them, hold down Alt and press G on your keyboard. Let's call this character. Now we can create a cloner and we want to add this character null as a child of it. We can do that automatically on the clicking of the cloner if we hold down Alt. So just hold Alt and it'll see that your character null will be automatically added as a child to the cloner. Cool. So now we can go and set up our cloner options. So go into the Object tab of your cloner. Let's set the mode to be Grid Array. I want to bring the number of clones on the Y down to 1. And I want to increase the distance between each of our clones. So we can set it to 400 on the X and the same on the Z. Cool. So let's hit play and see that it doesn't work. So right now our mesh, the character's body isn't following along with the skeleton. Quick fix for that. Go to your body object, unfold that, click on your skin, go into the Include tab, and let's delete this and set the mode to Exclude. Because the cloner is generating all of these bodies and the object manager doesn't actually see them. They're just being generated by the cloner. So just, that's a quick fix for that problem. And that is kind of it. Now it's not the end of the tutorial because I'm also going to be talking about how we can randomize the animation so that it doesn't all play at exactly the same time like it's doing now. And we're also going to be randomizing the rotation of our characters to make it look a bit more random, I suppose. And finally, I'm going to be showing you how you can go about setting up the depth of field, which you already know based off of watching the introduction. So let's continue on. So we have our animation cloned, and that is all working nicely. There is a problem straight away. You can see that the eyeballs aren't actually following along where they should be. They're just floating there. So again, we just need to go to our eyeballs object, unfold that, click on the skin, and we can delete this out of the list here and set it to exclude. Now our eyeballs are going to follow along. Okay. Cool. So how do we set this up so that they're not all going to start dancing at exactly the same time? We can select our cloner, go to MoGraph, Effector, and we can add in a random effector. Now the reason I clicked on the cloner object before I did that is so that our random effector would automatically be added into the effectors list here. So let's set up our random effector so that we can offset the animation so that they're not all going to start dancing at the same time. Go into the parameter tab and let's set the time offset here to something like, we'll say 120. Now if I hit play, you'll see that they're all going to start dancing at different times. Now the way it is now isn't very good because we don't want these guys standing here doing nothing. We want constant animation throughout all of our clones. So how do we set that up? Go into your cloner object, go to the transform tab and set the animation mode to loop. Now, the minute we hit play, everybody's going to be doing some part of the animation. Nice. I also want to randomize the rotation of our characters so that they're not all facing in the kind of same direction. So go into your random object, go into the parameter tab, and let's turn on rotation. One thing I spotted here is that we have randomness along the Y, which we don't want, because otherwise not everybody's going to be standing on the floor. So make sure you set that to 0. We can have some randomness along the X and the Z, we just don't want any along the Y. Now let's get some randomness in the rotation of our characters. So we can set this to 45 degrees. And let's see what we get. See what we've got. Okay, so our characters are all dancing away. They're each doing their own dance. Well, they're all doing the same dance, but they've all started at different times. They're all at different parts of the animation. So that's looking pretty good. I'm just making sure that we're not getting any intersections. Now, this is actually running quite slow, so we're not going to be... Okay, so right away I can see an intersection there. So what we can do to avoid any intersections is just create more space between our clones. So what we could do is go into our cloner, go into the object tab, and we can increase the size. That's going to increase the distance between our clones, but it's going to do so in a very uniform way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the push apart effector. Again, I'm going to click on my cloner before I add the effector. Go to MoGraph Effectors, and we can add in the push apart. Now we can increase the radius, and that's going to push apart our clones. Cool. So hopefully we won't get any more intersections, but we can check towards the end of the tutorial. Next thing I'm going to do is increase the amount of clones that I have. So I'm going to go for 5 on the X, and I'm going to go for maybe 5 or, yeah, I'll go for 6 on the Z, and I'll increase the distance also. No, actually, I'll leave it as is. I can use the push apart effector to push these guys apart a little bit more. Again. Something like that. We'll go 200. Cool. Okay, so now we have all of our clones, and they're all going to be dancing away. Now they're going to be going quite slowly because there's quite a lot going on in our scene. But that doesn't matter for now. Let's create a floor, just like that, and let's go into our front view. Middle mouse click and go into your front view there, and let's just zoom in to make sure that our guys are all standing on the floor. So yeah, they're pretty much on the floor. We could just bring the floor up just a little bit to make sure of that. And now let's create some lights. So I'm going to create an area light, and I want this to constantly be looking into the center of our scene. So to do that, I'm going to create a null, call this light target, and I'm going to add a target tag to this light object. Right click on it, go to Cinema 4D tags and add a target tag there, and then we can drag this light target null into the target object field. So now our light will be constantly looking at the center of our scene. Let's bring this right back, and let's go and turn on our interactive render region, Alt-R on your keyboard to do that, and you might have to just, when you turn on your one, it'll probably be about this size, so you'll just have to drag out the corners there. And you'll also have to increase the quality so that you'll get a more accurate representation of what your render is going to look like. Okay, so our light isn't actually giving us any shadows at the moment. So let's turn on shadows, go into the light, go into the shadow tab. Let's set the shadows to area. We can turn the density down to about 80, we'll go 75%. Okay, now if we increase the size of our light, which I'm going to do now, go into your light, go into the details tab, let's increase the size on the X to 400 and the same on the Y, and look what happens to the shadows. So it's kind of blurring our shadows a bit more, which is kind of the look I'm going for. I want to decrease the intensity or the density of the shadows, maybe down to 70%, something like that. Do you know what? I'm going to leave it at 75 because the density is going to be reduced by our next light that we're going to create right now. First of all, let's turn off our interactive render region. Alt-R on your keyboard. Let's call this key. That's our key light. And let's click and drag on any of the axes here, and that'll duplicate our light. And as you can see, as I'm moving it around, it's going to be targeted towards our light target null, which is very handy. So let's bring this over here, kind of to the opposite of where our key light is. And we can bring in the general tab here, we can bring the intensity down to about 55%. Let's call this fill. And let's go and check what that looks like. Alt-R to bring up your interactive render region. So now we're getting shadows. So we're getting two sets of shadows. We're getting one from our key and one from our fill. We just want shadows from our key. So let's turn off shadows in our fill. Go into the shadow tab and let's set that to none. Okay, so let's zoom in here a bit. Let's actually now try and focus on setting up a nice camera angle for our scene. So I might zoom in a bit more. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for something like this for the camera. So I'm going to add a camera, make it active, and I want to make sure that I'm unable to move this around anymore. So let's add a protection tag. Right click on the camera object, go to Cinema 4D tags, and let's put on a protection tag on that. So now we won't be able to move that around. Great. Let's create a material for our floor. Double click here in the materials panel and let's call this floor. Let's open that up. And no, we don't need to do anything. We can just apply it to our floor object. Bit dark, maybe we can brighten it up a bit. Yeah, something like that. And let's see. I want to set up one more light that's going to kind of act as a rim light. It's going to just give us a bit more definition on our edges of our characters. Well, that's the aim of this anyway. So let's turn off our interactive render region, deactivate our camera. And I want to create, I'm just going to create a light here. It's going to be an omni light. So you can see it's just an omni light here in type. I'm going to go into my top view and I'm going to bring it back the way so that the camera is kind of pointing directly towards it. And let's see what this looks like. Okay, so it's giving us some highlights. I think it is anyway. Let me zoom in a bit more. So we need to bring it up anyway along the Y. Just bring that up. And now we're going to get some nice highlights along the back edges of our, so if I turn that off and on, you can see that the difference that's making. We're getting some nice highlights along the edges of our characters. Let's go back into our camera, turn back on our interactive render region, Alt-R on your keyboard. Okay, so maybe it's a bit too bright at the moment, so let's just reduce the intensity down to about 75%. Maybe go up a bit to 85. Yeah, okay, so that's cool. I'm happy enough with that. So now we're going to go ahead and set this up for render. Now before we do, I just want to do a quick check. Turn off my interactive render region first of all. I want to do a quick check that we're not going to be getting any intersections of our characters. So if I hit play there, this is going to play. Now Cinema is going to try, well, it's going to load every single frame, and that's going to take a really long time. It's not going to be very efficient for us if we just want to check for intersections or clashing clones. So let's pause that. We can go here to our playback rate, hold down your left click, and let's turn off all frames. Now, this will give us a much faster playback. Obviously, it's not going to play every single frame, but we're going to get an idea of any problem clones that are going to bump into each other. It looks like we're doing okay. We have our push apart doing its thing with the radius is set to 200, so it looks like we're going to be okay on that. I don't think we're going to have any problems with intersections or any of our characters are going to be crossing over each other. Okay, so that's fine. I'm going to put this back to all frames. Not that it matters now at this stage. And I'm going to set this up for render. Now at the start of the tutorial I was talking about setting this up for motion blur. Now this is going to really increase your render time a lot. So if you don't want to have any motion blur, well, I suppose everybody wants to have motion blur because your end result is going to be more realistic. But yeah, believe me when I say the settings I'm going to apply for this render are going to really push your render time out a lot. Now it's up to you if you want to do that. If not, you can actually just render out a standard render, and then you can bring your sequence into After Effects. There's tons of tutorials on YouTube about how you can create fake motion blur inside of After Effects. But I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to let my computer do all the work. And this is how you go about doing that. So let's set the renderer here to physical. Go into the physical option here, and motion blur needs to be turned on. Now sampling quality, I'm setting this to medium. Again, this is going to hugely increase the render time, so just keep that in mind. For output, I'm setting this to 1920 by 1080. And I want to render out all frames. Now that is a lot of frames, so again, you guys can reduce the amount of frames that you're rendering. Honestly, I probably don't need that many. I'll just go for
I'm going to go all. I'm feeling mad. I'm going to go crazy and go all frames. I can stop it if I decide to later on. Anti-aliasing, everything else is fine. We don't need anti-aliasing. And that is it for the render settings. Now, we need to go into our camera, go into the physical tab, and we need to set the shutter speed here to something like this. That should give us some decent motion blur. So if I just play this, and if I do it, I'm just going to do a test render on this frame. So I don't want to save this for now, and I just want to do the current frame. And I can do the render to picture viewer here. And that is going to take a bit of time to render, so I'm just going to pause the video right now. Okay, so that's rendering finally. And you can see we're getting some nice motion blur there in the characters. So his hands blurred there and there also. So that is the effect we're going for. Now again, you can see how long this has taken for one frame and it's still not finished. You're looking at maybe over a minute per frame. So this is increasing my render time hugely. I'll stress it again, hugely. So again, just check out YouTube. There's tutorials that show you how to create fake motion blur inside of After Effects, and you're going to cut your render time in half and you're going to save your CPU. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead again and let all this, let the computer do the work for me, I suppose. So I'm going to turn back on save. I'm going to save this to a folder called sequence. And I'm going to call it sequence also. Make sure it's in the folder called sequence. And that is it, guys. That is good to go. I think it is good to go. Yeah. Oh yeah, options need to be set to all frames as well in the output. Frame range, all frames. Do a Control S to save. Maybe you might have to do a save as, you probably do. And let's go to render queue. And we can add this to the render queue and click on play. So that's the end of the tutorial, guys. Hope you learned a lot, and I hope you don't blow up your computers with this huge render. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.